Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in. Welcome back to our weekly podcast. My name is Patrick Tan, General Counsel for ChainArgos, the blockchain analytics firm made famous for outing Binance's $1.4 billion BUSD under collateralization. As usual, with me every week, Jonathan Reiter, our CEO and Chief Data Scientist. I'm glad to be back at the bunker. I wouldn't say I'm 100% better. I would say I appear less contagious. That's about it.
Appear less contagious.
That's all. That's all that matters, right? That's what we're just doing it for the likes. So thank you for tuning in. What do we have for you this week? All right. So this week, quite a bit of litigation going on, depositions and stuff like that. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about. We did some work with the OFAC and Fentanyl addresses, and how that leads out and where does it go. I think it's interesting probably that we have a quick chat about where it's where that those funds hit. We're also going to talk a little bit about Binance and what's been happening with some of those depositions that have been taken there. And also, you know, there have been conflicting, well, there's been some discussion about like things like having root access and stuff like that. So we'll talk a little bit about that.
The way the tech team was organized. Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
Finally, we'll talk about all the latest from the FTX trial. I know you guys are excited about that. There's been quite a bit of discussion. And then there'll be a bit of bonus content. I'm not going to tell you what it is. If you watch to the end of the show, then you'll hear about that. Okay, so right off the bat, let's talk about fentanyl.
Well, okay, so the, OFAC, everybody knows OFAC, the part of the U.S. government that says people are outlaw, whatever, not allowed to deal with. They publish lists of addresses. They sanction stuff semi-routinely now. And we sucked in a whole bunch of those addresses. And it's interesting. I mean, this is, public
it's all
court
public
filings,
record.
whatever. People have been accused of this stuff. So a lot of the fentanyl trade-related stuff, Chinese people, and by Chinese people, I mean Chinese nationals that the U.S. government has said are involved in this trade.
Yeah, Chinese people.
People. I mean, you're not a Chinese national either, but
not that I know of.
That's a you problem. That's a you question, I suppose. So some of these addresses associated with these folks and seeing what exchanges they interact with, because you'd expect it to be Chinese exchanges, because that's a thing for whatever Chinese people. There's an awful lot of interaction with these OFAC addresses and OKX in particular. On-chain data, it's interesting that that's the case.
So I guess long story short, what we've tracked is that some of these fentanyl wallets, which are publicly identified, by the way, go to publicly identified OKX wallets.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, there's more of that. So, I mean, I think a lot of people who are, North America, Western Europe exchange users are aware there's a bunch of Asian exchanges.
Yeah.
And I don't think people really appreciate what's used for what. I mean, no high-level allegations, but, you ask most people to name an exchange that was used in this part of the world, they would say Binance. Fine. And it's just interesting that there are a bunch of others, and in this particular case, that one's come up a lot more than other things. No idea if that's just because the FBI got a server there or what. Again, we do not have anywhere near enough information to draw those sorts of inferences.
But I can tell you that based on what's been declared publicly through the court documents and what we tracked based on publicly tagged addresses, almost all of it goes to OKX.
Yeah, it certainly seems like at least several of the, I guess, is that a first-tier exchange, second-tier exchange? It's in the tier below Binance. Maybe Binance is like the 0th tier exchange. They're a reasonably large exchange, right? And it seems like these kinds of problems of interacting with people that the U.S. and Western governments are not okay with is pretty widespread in a way that may not yet be fully appreciated. We don't yet have enough information to say that one particular exchange specializes in one type of work, right? Because there's been stuff about Binance doing Russians, and there's stuff about Bitrex doing Russians in North Korea, whatever. So I don't know that anybody can infer a pattern yet over this exchange is better at or focuses more on whatever one particular type of thing. But as these investigations roll on, clearly there's investigations that aren't public yet because, of course, there always are. These lists are going to get longer, and we're going to start to see probably more and more of this.
The other interesting thing is that if you look at some of the sizes of these transactions, the kind of consistent with, the
some of these things look more like retail, whatever. Yeah. So years ago, we were seeing either huge amounts of money, hacks being laundered, consistent long streams. A lot of this stuff looks much more routine.
Yeah.
Like some of these services just used by
couple hundred thousand, which kind of makes sense. I mean, if if you were trying to get payment for your fentanyl supplies. Those seem like the correct prices.
Closer to sort of day-to-day business kind of a level.
Those seem like the correct prices that you'd be paying for fentanyl. I mean, I don't know how much fentanyl. Well, actually, I kind of know how much fentanyl costs.
No, but I mean, the trade amounts for these things are billions of dollar type numbers. And, if you talk about money laundering allegations through FTX and Alameda, you're talking about billions of dollars.
Correct.
And large numbers of transactions that add up to. In cases now, we're starting to see that while it's out of bounds, and you look at it, and it's a total six-figure amount of money with 2 digits worth of transfers.
Yeah.
So clearly, there's a lot of information out there. There's a gap between the 10 billion and the 100,000 that you'd expect to get filled in. I mean, that's a guess. We clearly don't have inside information on that one, but I think that's a pretty good guess.
All right. So switching gears a little bit, let's talk a bit about Binance and some of the depositions this week. And
I guess the documents that were made public.
Depositions, correct. So these are old depositions that have been made public. Yeah, correct. Let me restate that. So we saw. I mean, there's a whole bunch of stuff that's redacted, kind of sloppily in some cases as well, because it's quite clear what the redactions are referring to. But I think stuff like, especially, and this is something I wanted to talk about, having root access.
Yeah, so there was a table about where their employees are, and it seemed like the employees are basically all in Vancouver and Shanghai.
Shanghai, North Dakota.
Yeah, and they're all Shanghai.
Yeah.
And technology, whatever, employees.
Yeah.
And the fact that I think we now have several sources for Binance's so their cloud root keys, so the ability to control the entire technology stack for even the U.S. entity being held by the offshore dev team, or the dev. There's only a dev team. I mean, that certainly tells you that, functionally speaking, the U.S. operation was under the control of whoever manages the dev team that's based in whatever, Canada, China, whatever it is. I mean, from a bank background, there are certainly situations in which the developers have more access to local markets, branches than the front office employees do. Because, for example, I use Korea as an example sometimes. Korea is very restricted, and, offshore, whatever, can't do any onshore business. And the tech team, generally speaking, was separate, but it didn't mean that there wasn't the ability to access at a suitably high level if there was a problem. You didn't just say, well, the guy who wrote the code is sitting in London and he can't access the system in Seoul, so let it burn. Right? That's not the way these things operate. So it's not insane outright that Binance had those sorts of arrangements, but given the size of the team and the amount of work that was going on, it's very hard to believe there was any meaningful segregation of responsibilities, particularly since we've seen, even on the front office, the bank account management payments, signatories for bank accounts were not separated. So that really suggests that it was run as a single tech operation. I mean, if you're running in the same AWS account, or if the people who wrote the code are using keys that come from several AWS accounts, we haven't seen their IAM console, for those who know what that is, although there may be screenshots someday. Those things seem really, really glued together. There's no attempt to separate properly.
And that's a problem. That's going to be a problem.
I would imagine so. I mean, so, for example, the way our stuff is set up, he has no access to the actual cloud proper keys. I don't think I could. I mean, I know who to get them from.
Yeah.
I don't, because that way you just can't cause certain types of trouble. You can't make certain mistakes. Stuff gets separated, whatever. If those are just disseminated all over the place, then it's extremely unlikely, particularly a team of more junior and less experienced developers will have stuff separated. They may even have interdependencies among systems, much like FTX, which we're going to come to in a moment, that they didn't even anticipate or plan on, that just sort of appeared, and then there was a weird dependence that they had to fix afterwards.
All right, so let's talk about the FTX trial. There was the Michael Lewis book, and I read some of the excerpts from that, mainly the ones that had to do with sex, which I thought were a bit bizarre. I mean, maybe, I don't know, maybe everybody does have a pros and cons as to why you should hook up list. I don't know. But, okay, so other than the salacious details of that, tell us what you think about what's been going on in the FTX trial.
Well, I mean, the testimony so far is fascinating. So there have been a sequence of people who worked at FTX Alameda, in some cases who'd worked with them earlier or different places, friends for a long time. And essentially everybody's just describing that this thing was a mess.
Yep. Okay, so this is something that we talked about earlier at coffee today. Now, it's not a crime to be a complete dumbass and run your company to the ground.
Well, it's not a crime to do that if you have an unlicensed, unregistered. Stupid business is not a crime outside of finance licenses.
Being a crap manager is not a crime. Where you could maybe make an argument for criminal negligence in certain special circumstances, but generally, the law and the courts have tended to side on the sides of entrepreneurs. You know, people make mistakes, they learn from them. Hopefully, in the future, this guy will become a better manager. Now,
so just to be clear, those are mistakes that do not include
correct.
lying to people.
Yes.
Other mistakes.
So let's say, for instance, there was a situation where SBF and the crew really didn't know. They were clueless, as Michael Lewis would have you believe.
Clueless, incompetent, just
as Michael Lewis would have you believe.
Yeah.
So clueless. Then, we've discovered it. Now, had they come clean at that point and said, we've mismanaged this thing, it is a mess, let's declare insolvency and try to claw back as much value as possible to all the stakeholders. There is a situation where either no prison time or very little prison time is seen by anybody.
We can have a conversation about how if at the first signs of trouble or relatively early on in discovering problems, they'd come clean and try to fix it. You'd have a discussion about whether or not something illegal occurred.
However, historically, what we've always seen when tracking frauds is that almost never happens. And in fact, most frauds start off not intending to be frauds, but, you know, bad business decisions that kind of eventually become minor frauds, because, you know, as you tell small lies, you have to keep telling bigger and bigger lies to cover up the small lies because they compound. Lies have a...
In this case, literally, because if you're paying interest on money you don't have, it's actually compounding in the,
correct.
in the math
compounding,
sense.
And then the fraud becomes... it grows to such a size that now it's no longer just, you know, ignorance. It's just a complete criminal conspiracy. And we've seen that with these guys. It's that if they had an opportunity to sort of like have a come to Jesus moment, if you will, they chose not to come to Jesus. They decided to go full on, like, you know, let's go hyperspace fraud.
I actually think it's even a bit worse than that. So one of the technology people who testified, I think it was yesterday, U.S. time, was describing how this account balance debiting error, whatever, had been discovered months before it finally got fixed and corrected and more widely disseminated. It was known as a problem, but it continued to roll on as a multi-billion-dollar problem for a long time. I mean, I'm not saying you have to fix the software immediately because sometimes that's not possible. But within a day or two might be nice. By immediately, I mean now. 6 months later is not okay.
No.
And there seemed to be a lot of consistent testimony that these things were discussed in meetings among more than, you know, these meetings had more than one person in them. They were, you know, group gatherings to discuss things. And that kind of rolled on for quite a while without things getting fixed. And then when it blew up, they chose to lie about it. I'm sure you're coming to that transition, so there you go.
Yeah, and once you choose to lie about it, that's it.
Yeah, certainly if it's $7 billion or whatever, that, you know, they had one thing where the mistake was originally 16 and it was corrected to 8 or something, whatever. These numbers are huge, and they chose to lie about it for months. So the bug was finally corrected in June of 2022, I believe, but it had been discovered, you know, around the turn of the year. I mean, again, this is just one guy's testimony, but it seems to be a consistent picture across everybody's testimony that they were disastrously disorganized. We haven't gotten Sam Trabucco's testimony yet, if we're getting it.
Disastrously disorganized. Again, not ideal, not really a crime.
Actually, I have no idea if that's a crime in the Bahamas. But anyway, I have no clue.
I express no opinion on that at all. Yeah. But where it becomes criminal is when you start...
Oh, yeah, from June to November, I don't think anybody disputes was a crime.
And that should be enough to potentially...
it's got to be.
Send them away for a...
Yeah. I mean, whether or not what they did before 2022 even was criminal or not, it seems like there's enough clear stuff.
No, it's not going to be relevant.
It's not going to matter because once you're up to whatever 100 years in prison, it makes no difference from that point. And... I mean, he can still reach a plea agreement before they go to the jury. I believe he can still reach a plea agreement before the jury comes back, right? Yeah, so this is supposed to be another couple of weeks, whatever. They could still come up with some kind of settlement, but I don't know. He's not moving in that direction.
Well, you know, my experience has been always that defendants tend to play it out for a long time, thinking, and then when things, as more and more testimony comes out, as the trial progresses, more witnesses come forward, and the case looks increasingly bad. Then the defense counsel, usually this is the point where they tell their client, hey, look, I think maybe I should go to...
Well, in this case, it's presumably his parents. I mean, I'm just saying, not that they're formally his lawyers, but like you listen to your lawyers, but you'd imagine if your mother's like, look, dude, you should plead guilty.
I just don't know because they don't have a lot of trial experience.
Okay, no, fair enough.
They don't have a lot of trial experience, and they definitely don't have a lot of criminal trial experience.
Yeah, okay. No, I guess you sit there and they give you you get the witness list in advance.
Yeah,
but I guess you sit there and you listen to people and eventually think, this isn't going
this
so
isn't
well
going
for
well.
me.
Yeah, this isn't going the way you thought it would.
Yeah, okay.
And so that's maybe when you could. So this is far from over.
Well, I mean, it's 6 weeks from. Well, there'll be appeals anyway, but.
Yeah, but I mean, I think. Well, I think it's a good idea to just play out. I don't even know if that's on the table.
I mean, who was it? I was listening to somebody who was suggesting that the strategy was based entirely on getting a hung jury and then hoping they wouldn't be able to get a retrial. Look, that's not a stupid strategy given the way this works. I don't know.
But it depends on your jury selection. Like, that's a whole different ball game altogether. Okay.
Okay. All right.
Finally, let's talk about the last thing on our list here. What is it?
Oh, so the SEC, Prager Metis, is an accounting firm. So this is not 100% on point as a crypto thing, but this is an accounting firm that was active in the space, and they were rebuked, fined, settlement, whatever, for I believe it was hundreds of customers where their engagement letters included, or the terms of their engagement for doing audits included indemnification provisions. So one of the basic requirements of the Public Company Accounting Oversight Board, the accounting regulator in the U.S., is that the accountant be independent of the company they're auditing, and essentially that their reputation be on the hook if they did something wrong. So the partners have to pay, the partners are the ones that are going to get in trouble, et cetera, et cetera. Usually there's no criminal for that, particularly after Arthur Andersen and Ron. We talked about this a few months ago. The government tends not to criminally go after accountants after they did once and it was a catastrophe. When the government won, it was a catastrophe for the clients of that audit firm. But in this case, the provision these people put into the contract that if they, had fines, whatever, if there was trouble because the audits were screwed up, that the company would just effectively reimburse them. So you're not independent and you're not on the hook anymore. So, that's crazy. It's against the rules. It's explicitly against the rules.
Yes.
It's been at least soft against the rules as long as audits have existed. If the auditor isn't the one that's going to get in trouble for screwing up the audit, what's the point of having an auditor? The company's already going to get in trouble if they're lying. So it's interesting to see that there's more investigation into accounting practices now in firms adjacent to the space. I wonder if some of the companies that really specialize in the crypto area, not just, they did some work, but really specialize, are going to start to have some settlements, have some stuff come out, have some complaints. We don't have access to contracts that contain those provisions because they're all confidential. But the Accounting Oversight Board can ask for them, and the accounting firms have to provide them, particularly if they, in this case, it appears they had at least one or two whistleblower type provided access to these contracts. And then it's a pretty open and shut case because you can't have these provisions. That's a new one. I'm not familiar with this being a problem since the accounting regime was changed in the Sarbanes-Oxley era.
It's definitely the first time I've seen it.
Yeah, it's a weird one. And widespread. It wasn't like two customers. It was hundreds of widespread problem in the accounting firm.
I think it was pretty opportunistic if you think about it because it allows you to have your cake and eat it. It allows you to serve all these customers and charge them a ridiculous amount of fees because nobody else would serve them. And, rightly so.
But it's a crazy business model.
It's crazy if you thought that you could get away with it.
Because statistically, companies that say, please sign off on this audit, I'll indemnify you against any fines that you experience in the end, are companies that are more likely to have a problem, go bankrupt, and end up, in the newspaper. If you do that for 100 of them, inevitably one of them is going to blow up and end up in the newspaper.
Yeah.
So you're going to get, because the first time they read the one contract, they're asking for all your other contracts, and you have no choice. It doesn't even make sense to me as a business idea. Some of these things may not be legal, but you can understand the business rationale. Because if you don't get caught, you keep X. If you do get caught, you whatever.
The irony is that these guys are accountants, and they didn't do the math.
Yeah, which
because if you think about it, all you need is one to blow up.
Yeah, and the chance of one blowing up may be 1%, but if you have a couple hundred, that's not the way the binomial theorem works. But it is actually.
Yeah. All right. So that's all we have for you this week. Thank you for watching. If you've got any comments, hit them up on the comment section below. Otherwise, please like and subscribe. We really appreciate it when you do that. If you have any topics that you'd like us to talk about, feel free to reach out to us either on Twitter or we're on LinkedIn, but DM us on Twitter. And then go to YouTube, leave some comments below, and we'll try to cover them in the next episode. Otherwise, thank you for watching. Have a great weekend. We'll see you again next week. Bye bye.